Welcome back pilots to this Jetworks build video. In this video we'll be building the first of the Maxx series, which is the Typhoon. It also includes retractable gear, which you can obviously 3D print or purchase on your own. So the first step for me was to do the fuselage bottom and the support strips lower. As you can see, I've got it all cut out. I've actually marked where we're going to be removing this piece later on in the build. So there is the build guide available. Parts of it I didn't actually follow in the processes just due to how I was building it. So do refer back to that. As you can see here, we've just got a small amount of glue on the opposite side. Just smudge it about so you get a nice thin even application, just ensuring glues all along the surface itself. And we're just putting a piece back in just to hold it together. And then onto the tail section. I've cut them off just for ease, because it will be a bit fragile. And then on the lower supports for the rear part, again small amount of glue and just to offer it up. We'll set them to the side and we'll put them on later on in the build. So the next step is to do the bulkhead 1 and bulkhead 3. Just be sure to turn the belly panel over so you're putting it into the right side. We test fit with bulkhead 1 and a small amount of glue and just offer up. Very simple. It is a relatively quick build this as well, just like the Typhoon itself, albeit this is the Maxx version. It's getting built with 9mm foam and 6. So we test fit there. I used a pen just to break the tension around the corner so it slots in nice and easy. And that's that. So moving on to the next part. Next part is the inner fuselage belly and bulkhead 2. I think these steps are actually how the plan goes, the build guide, sorry. So a small amount of glue, and I've just saved a wee hole there. I've not covered the whole belly panel due to the front retract house and the space where that goes. So offer it up with the glue, and I'm just using a scrap piece of foam just to smudge it about, make sure it's a nice even coating all the way along it. Offer it out into the belly panel and then onto bulkhead number 2, 3 actually it is. I've already put 1 and 2 in. Simple move. So the next one is the Canard bulkheads and the lower fuselage corner strips. Again, very simple, quick process here. Small amount of glue on the contact surfaces, making sure you've got it in the cutouts. And then the corner strips. Small amount of glue along the bottom. And then just underneath bulkhead 3. On the tips as well, and then just slide into position. Because there's a slight bend in it, I'm using some modelling pins just to hold it in place, just in case it decides to slide out a wee bit. So the next part was the nose infill pieces in the Canard servo tray. Again, very simple, quick here, just a small amount, just where you're going to contact surfaces for them meeting up together. Slide those into position. In this part I did actually glue the opposite side. Too keen and eager to get on with the build, Baz. But once I figured it out, turn it around and that's it in place. And then on to the servo tray. Lower servo tray. Again, small amount on the contact surfaces. Squeeze the lip through bulkhead 1. And again, just a couple of modelling pins to tack into place. So the next step was the finish off the Canard servo tray, and then the build guide says to move on to the EDF housing. However, that'll come just a wee bit later in the build, next couple of steps. So again, small amount of glue and just smudge it about with a scrap piece of foam. Line it up into place. And the RX tray and the EDF mount. So I've got the RX tray in, again simple enough. So the EDF mount, I've cut it out of the ply by using the guides, and it fit pretty damn good. Obviously I've got a 90mm sitting in here, so I've already pre-assembled this, slid the EDF in it, and I used just a touch of hot glue at the back just to hold it in place, making sure it was nice and flush against it. And with the forward bulkhead, again, small amount of glue on the contact surfaces. I've put some on the EDF housing, but just twist it round about and make sure it's an even coverage, and then carefully slot into place, because the joins are quite fragile. There's a thin part just at the front of the intake, but slid in very well. As you can see, I've got the wires and that there, so it can be a wee bit fiddly. Next part I moved on, it was the corner reinforcing uppers. So I have a wee bit of blue tape there and on the small pieces, because the foam that I had was just a wee bit short. So I've just cut it out and then added the extra part on the end with a wee bit of tape. Now the corner reinforcers, again, there is a part, think it's the air brake tray spacing. The foam was very thin. Again, I've just taped it back together. I'm going to glue that on. I'm not bothered about the tape being there. I'll actually be inside the build. So I just used the corner reinforcers just to mark a wee line to make sure I don't go past it, so that when we come to putting the servo tray in later, I'm not rising above where it should be. Again, very simple. Just be careful with the thin part. Just right there, I'm just tacking into place because obviously the glue's just still a wee bit wet. And then slowly moving along, making sure it's nice and flush with the side panels. However, the next part, as it's contact glue, it's had a wee bit of time to air dry, so it was very tacky. There's no requirement to put any modelling pins in. Put it down and it held very well. Just stuck. So make sure you're doing the opposite sides when you're doing it like this. So here we are moving it on to the fuselage and ready to put it together. Sorry, the belly panel. And due to the EDF being quite heavy with the motor and the bulkheads and stuff, again, just be careful because it can be quite fragile. I'm using the 3D printed exhaust just to keep it nice and level so that it's not leaning over. So I've got some glue all the way along the contact surfaces, and I'm just using a wee bit of hot glue up against the bulkheads just to try and get it to stick as quick as possible, and then we'll leave the contact glue just to set and go off along the rest of the side panels, because obviously we'll be trimming them back a wee bit later and sanding them. So when it's lined up to bulkhead 1, just moved it along the side of the panels and just using some modelling pins just to tack it in place and hold it together, just to make sure nothing decides to pop off a wee bit. I want a nice good contact because this thing's going to be wicked. Next step I moved on, it was the outer sides now that we've got the inners done. Again, very simple process. And before we did that, I left the corners there, as you can see. I didn't stick them down straight away. I thought I'll wait till the side panels are attached and the glues went off. Using a wee bit of hot glue just on, tacking it together so it's nice and quick, making sure it's stuck together. Again, I'm not waiting on a wee bit of contact adhesive to go off. So once I was happy with that, some Yoo-hoo along the side panels. As you can see, quite liberally, I just kind of whacked it on there a wee bit more than I usually do. And just getting a wee bit of tape ready just for taping things together. Scrap piece of foam, just smudge all the glue about, make sure you've got a nice even surface. And the whole surface is covered. And then carefully sliding on the side panels. Again, I'm just lining it up to bulkhead 1. Wee bit of tape just to hold it on the front. And then working my way along it. Again, another wee bit of tape, just where you can see there's a wee bit of tension in the foam. again on the underside, just pulling it in nice and tight against the belly panel itself. We spot hot glue around the bulkhead, again just to quickly get it to stick. I have left it on the front EDF bulkhead because we put a wee bit glue in that later, but it was at the main bulkhead I was more concerned about. And again, do the same with the opposite side. Small amount of glue along, scrap piece of foam, and just smudge it about, make sure you've got a nice even coating. And then attach the next side panel. So in the plans, the next step is to use install the retract base, but here what I'm doing, obviously installing the intake tube first, and I had to cut a couple of wee reliefs due to the cone on the front of the bulkhead, and you can see there just where the intake joins together, there's a wee flange. Cut a small relief in the foam itself just to allow the slots to go through, because my printer's not big enough to do it in the one whole piece. So I'm just lining it up against the front and then marking it just so I can be sure it's nice and straight as possible, get a nice clean flow into the unit itself. Turn it around, mark the other side. Now I can see where the glue's going. Obviously we don't want to be putting too much on and going outside it, but as long as we're making sure it's all the way around the intake ring. And then here, the sanded part, I've put a bit of glue there along the sides as well, again just in the contact surfaces. And I chose not to drop my servo wires in just at the front there as the guide tells you. I chose to put them down through the retract base panel, which you'll see later on in the build. So once that was on, the next step was for me to move on to the thrust tube and the exhaust bulkheads. So obviously I've 3D printed the bulkhead, lightweight PLA. I've got the exhaust bulkhead, the foam part on the base of the thrust tube, and the reason I'm doing this is just to make sure I line it up nice and square, and it's not off slightly, so that when I put it all together and glue it onto the wooden bulkhead, it'll be nice and straight and there's no worry about it being just slightly off centre. So here, as you can see, I've actually got some lights on this one. Wee hole in the thrust tube and pull the wires and that through. This is a bit fiddly. We'll skip off past the fiddly parts. Some glue in the contact surface of the bulkhead, and again just smudging the glue about. Do the same on the opposite side. Now there will be parts of the video that is slightly off camera and not seen because it's quite a big build. It's part of the Maxx series. A wee trim on the back there just to make sure it's absolutely flush and square. Again, it's a wee bit fiddly here. Wee bit glue on the rear next to the bulkhead for the exhaust and hit the camera. Wee sneak peek at the intake there with the EDF mount sitting in it. So once I was happy that it was all square and flush, again just checking that you've got a nice clean flow out the back of the EDF unit into the thrust tube itself. And I've just got a couple of clamps that I'm just putting on it just to hold it in place until the glue cures. So again, next step, I've got the intake duct, I've done that. We're going to do the forward gear housing, and we'll get to the wings later, and we'll get the front retract fitted at the same time. So cut out the 3mm ply pieces, glued them together, and I've marked out there where the servos are going to go. Got some Yoo-hoo pour on the base itself and just a wee touch of hot glue around the edges, again so that when I put it in, it's going to stick and it's going to be there. It's not going to move about waiting on the contact glue to go. Now again, this is a wee bit fiddly, so this is where I chose to just feed the servo cables through. I'm not sure why I put hot glue in here. I should have just left it with Yoo-hoo. So I've got Make sure your servos are centered when you're actually getting to this position, because your control arms will need to be on before you put them in, because it's very difficult and tricky to get into them. I've actually replaced the gear door servo already. Must have been a dodgy servo I had in it. Again, as you can see, I've got the control arms and everything on centered. I'm just using the intake just to line it up, make sure I'm happy with everything before I go sticking things down and getting into position. So quickly using a wee bit of hot glue with this part. Again, I just want to make sure it's down, quick stuck, and doesn't move about. Again, just lining it up with the intake and just holding it until it dries. As you can see here, I've already put on the nose cone and sanded down the front of the fuselage as well. So here I've cut another wee relief just to get the retract servo wires to go through, and then just kind of lining it up in place just to see I'm happy with the fit before we go, you know, securing things down. Testing it, plugged it in, yeah, happy with everything. I will say here, I'm pretty sure you'll have better fittings than I used. I just used Z-bends for the steering arm on the front retract. I'll probably remove that and put on some proper fits, something that holds nice and flush at both ends. So I've just used a wee bit of hot glue again just to hold it in place, make sure it's stuck down before I start screwing it in, holding it into its final location. Again, I wasn't want it to slide about and stuff. We test, and yep, happy with that. Yeah, I think if I get an adjustable push rod, then I'll be able to square off the front wheel, make sure it's nice and true. So the next part was the front retract doors. Decided to put this in place so that it's all there and done before we start moving on to the belly panels and things. So because getting to it later on, I figured it would be quite difficult to get into if there's a 9mm piece of foam sitting surrounding it. So this was a wee bit tricky as well, just to get the right closing, but this is where I used the radio for the end stops and just adjusting the travel so that I could get it to close and open as far as I needed it to. Attached a wee bit of CA glue. Once I was happy with that, we test. Yep, closes. Close a bit further than I wanted, but as I say, when I get the belly panel on, I'll adjust the end stops, the end travel. So the next part that I moved on to, now that we've got all that together, I'm going to move on to the wing. So the wing was relatively simple. Obviously we've got some wee retainer pieces of foam there, so I've just cut off the rear ones. We'll just trim them back, and before I remove them, I'll add a piece of masking tape just so that we keep the same spacing and I'm not struggling to get the carbon fibre rod in. So do the same with the opposite side of the wing. Tape it down just to hold the glue, and we're mixing up some epoxy here. I think it was about 10 grams. I didn't measure up enough. Just be careful not to go too far at the end there. All the way along, then just smudge it about, spread out the glue and make sure it's on the sides, not just sitting on the base but actually touching the sides. Insert the carbon fibre rods that's been pre-cut, and then with just a little bit extra epoxy, what I had left, just putting it across the top just to make sure we've got a nice bond on both the top and the bottom. I should have really taped this up for a nice cleaner finish. However, this is going to be either on the base or hidden inside the wing itself, so you won't actually see it. So I'm mixing up some more epoxy, ready to slide it in. Remove the wee retaining tabs that was there from earlier, and just trying to tilt it up a bit so you can see. It's quite difficult with the camera angle, and just teasing some epoxy into the bulkhead itself, ready to accept the wings. A wee bit along the contact surfaces as well, and then we'll just get a wee scrap piece of foam and spread out. There's not a lot on here, just enough to make contact with the wing and get some purchase on it. So quite liberally just spreading it about. And then on the side panel itself, I've got some Yoo-hoo glue there, just to make contact with the wing itself. Then slide whatever side in you want, and just line it up, push it straight into the bulkhead, and then line the tips up with the fuselage sides itself, just making sure that they don't protrude through into the intake. And then a wee spare bit of epoxy on the wing spars that's going into the bulkhead. And I'm levelling it off on a couple of EDF boxes there, just to try and make sure that the wing's nice and flush and straight, as level as I can get it. Then on to the next step is the rear landing gear bay and the forward bulkhead. Simple enough. Wee bit glue on both. Using a pen just to mark, just to make sure that I've got the glue in the right position there. Once that's level with both ends, I'll just use a wee modelling pin again just to tack it in place and let the glue dry. And then the gear servo doors here, mounts actually, bulkhead. Super simple, wee bit of glue, off them up in place and I'll let it dry. Couple of modelling pins just to tack it in. So next step's the belly panel. I've already put the gear door assembly together, simple enough, and as you can see there, I've got the gear door servos in place. Just cut a wee hole through the wing and the belly panel just to get the servo cables up into the other side. So a wee bit Yoo-hoo along the contact surfaces, and then mixing up just a wee bit of 5-minute epoxy just for the retract housing where the foam's going to go into. I certainly don't want that moving. And then a wee bit on the intakes itself. Lightweight PLA can be a bit flexible, so I want it to stick to the belly and make sure it stays there. Super fit. And then we're using a wee bit of tape just to hold it in place. Got a couple of batteries there just to hold it down where the epoxy is, and then allow that to dry and go off. As I say, I've already got the servos in there for controlling the doors. So next step is carry on with the wing. The additional carbon fibre rods, the support pieces on the outer side of the wing. So with a sharp blade, just carefully trim away the support parts. And I've got a wee bit of tape there just holding it together, just to try and keep the distance even. And then what we'll do is we'll tape it off, but not like this. Make sure you tape it off on the opposite side of the wings, or I suppose you could do it like this, and then obviously turn the airframe around. But it took me a couple of minutes to realise that nope, I'm going to do it this way. So a wee bit of tape on the other side just to catch the epoxy, ready to house the carbon fibre rod. Now I've already pre-cut this, and it was just a wee test fit. Make sure it goes through to the hole in the retract housing. And there's the intake there. As you can see, I already have the intake attached. When I put the belly panel down, I thought, well, I'm at it, just glue the intake and it's done. So here we're just putting some epoxy in the slot for the carbon fibre spar, and again, as always, just tease it out to the edges of the wing, into the hole, ready to accept the rod in the housing, but just don't push it too far through. Just make sure it's in. You don't want it interfering with the retract. and then some spare epoxy on the top just to get that nice even coating. And this is where I should have taped it off nice and clean and remove any excess epoxy, but scrape most of it away and it's all fine. At the end of the day, this is going to be the underside. So next step, we've got the intake on, so it's time for the wing ribs. Very simple, easy process. And what I did was I lined them all up, just so I could space them out and make sure that they're in the right place, but obviously I missed one. That was from the opposite side. But again, just lining them up simple into the slots. A wee bit of glue on the contact surfaces. I'm really looking forward to having the airfoil shape on it as well. And a wee bit of glue just on the tips, the end pieces as it meet up against the bulkheads. And then do the same with the opposite side. So next is the plywood retract mounts. And obviously the gear which we've got in already. Not the gear, the gear doors. So here mixing up 20-minute epoxy, covering the contact surfaces where it's going to meet with the foam, and clearly I didn't have enough epoxy ready at the time, so just mixed up a wee bit more. And I'm sure this is 20-minute epoxy that I've got. Just putting on a nice liberal amount, making sure it's going to be fixed. Squeeze it into position, slot it down very well. And I'm just putting a wee bit of excess around at the seams where it meets up against the wing plate. And do the same with the opposite side. Once those were in, I just got a wee clamp. Just give it a slight grip just to make sure it's meeting up against the wing ribs. The other sides were meeting up pretty fine. Obviously I didn't have it as square as possible, so the wiring. Yeah, it's a bit of a mess. It seems it looks like it. But here we are. I'm putting in the Elevon servos. Just a wee bit of hot glue. Now I managed to get it running on a 10 channel receiver. A wee bit of mixing, a wee bit of Y connectors as well. Just make sure you've got all your servos centered before you put them on and test them out before you fit them into the model. A wee spot of hot glue just to hold the connectors down so they're no rattling about inside the wing. And hopefully they'll make it. And I'm not going to have to replace them, but yeah, they're a bigger servo than what I usually use. And obviously flip it around. Get the battery in and open up these doors just so we can feed through the wires, keep it nice and tidy. There we go. And then I just popped a wee hole through the wing plate into the other side so that we can get the servo cables through and out next to the rest of the spaghetti junction that we call wiring. And I did put a wee bit of hot glue. No hot glue, just a wee bit of Yoo-hoo just to tack it down and hold it into place. As you can see, we've got the ESC in, all the wires in, and putting them into the channels, just test them and stuff before we're ready to get the top panel on and seal it all in. There's a wee wide connector for the rudder. That's hooked into the steering retract as well. So next, canopy retract. No, the canopy retract, the Canard, sorry. Now we've got the bushings. So what I did was I started with a 2mm rod, forced it through so that we had it nice and level with the markings on each end. Slotted a 4mm over it, slid it through, punched a hole, again with a 6mm, and so on, just to get it out to the 10mm so that it's ready and nice and level as possible. Because I'm Yoo-hoo pour onto it, fixing them into the fuselage. And then we've got the carbon fibre rod going through that's going to control the canards. There's a control arm on, and I've got the push rod on it as well, albeit it's not cut. and I'm just sizing it out, making sure it's in the right spacing that I'm looking for. We spot a yoo-hoo just to hold them into position. I don't want them too far in, and I don't want them protruding out too much. I want a nice finish on this. There's a Canard servo going in. I'm not going to glue it just now, but it's centered. I've got the control arm on it. I'm just going to mark it up to show where it's. I need to put the Z bend in and link it up. So again, just trying to get the bushings right so that when the canards are up against it, it's not pushing into the fuselage sides itself. I'm mixing up a bit of 5-minute epoxy here, I'm sure it was, and some micro balloons just to thicken it up a bit. I'm being careful when I'm putting it into the hole so that I don't get any on the outside and end up sticking and fixing to the bushing itself. What I'm using is 2 the same size EDF boxes, or you can use books or something, but I figured the 2 boxes same size is the easiest. And then I've got both of them on, trying to get them set in the same position, nice and level for both of them. Then the next step is the fuselage top panel. I've actually got the air brake servo tray already in, as you can see there, and we're just marking up the fuselage just to show at the end of the top panel, just so I know where to stop with the glue. I don't want the glue going over and into the canopy. It's a nice liberal amount of glue along the contact surfaces. Want to make sure this is stuck down pretty well, but obviously not too much, so that when it gets to shaping and sanding, yoo-hoo can be quite elasticy if you've got too much of it there on the surface. So some glue across the tabs as well, scrap piece of foam just to smoothen it out, make sure that I've got good contact all the way along it. Get the rudder servo through, hook that up, and then get it into position. It's looking fabulous. And just using some tape, taping it down against the side panels just to hold it in place and make sure it's stuck pretty well. Give the glue a chance to go off and make sure none of it's popping off. So next step is now the canopy with the rear retaining catch, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Some of the simplest things. The 3D printed cockpit looks stunning, so we're just using that. We've got it in position up against the nose cone where it's supposed to be, and then some 5-minute epoxy underneath. We're just lining it up so that when the canopy goes down, goes into the latch, tiniest wee bit of space just to make sure there's some relief, and just hold it until it goes off. Love the canopy latch, want to see more of that. But yeah, the 3D printed canopy looks stunning. Done it in 2 walls, light PLA, 0% infill, and it's fantastic. Yep, catches and closes down very well. So the next step, the air brake base and actually attaching the air brake. Now this was proper fiddly. So I've got a bit of wee CA glue in the extension arm for the air brake, centered off the servo as well. Hopefully the CA, I'm sure the CA will be fine, hold it well for a long time. But yeah, this was really fiddly. So now that it's there in position, I've actually forgot to put the screw in it, and just testing out the movement. Obviously with the end stops, what I've done is I've reduced the end stops just so that it doesn't close right down, and it gives me an opportunity just to mend it. I'm just doing a wee bit of trimming here. I'm not sure whether I actually got it wrong or it was just my position of the servo arm, but I just trimmed a wee bit away from the foam there, just a wee bit extra just to make sure. Testing out the mechanism, yeah, it works pretty well. Then on to trying to get it fit together. Now we've got 1mm piano wire that's going to go through the front to hold it in position. That was, I'd love to say simple enough, but yeah, easy enough if you're quite patient. Get it to go through both sides. Obviously I couldn't get it done at that side. Tried for the opposite and managed to get it through pretty well. But the fiddliest part is getting the servo arm, the linkage all together. This was super fiddly. So take your time, be a wee bit patient, you will get there in the end. But trust me when I say I've cut at least 15 minutes off anyway of trying to get it in. Tried to get it in while it was fixed, tried to do it while it was upside down, as you can see. Yeah, let's skip all that. Managed to get it through. So let's just test it, get the mechanism together. Get the wee pin in the front just to hold it in place. And then we can test it out. Yep. Works fantastic. And as you can see there at the end of the air brake, I actually had a wee bit of trimming because it was sitting against the top panel. But that was simple enough, just a wee angle trim at each side. And there's a servo base plate going in. The air brake base plate. Small amount of yoo-hoo pour along it. And then just slide that into position. Now that that's there, time to secure the servo in place. As you can see, I've got it fully extended, the linkage is still in. And at this point, yep, realised that I didn't have the servo arm screw in it, just to hold it. So we get that in, glue down the servo. And then back to the fiddly part of getting the 1mm push rods through it. Looks really good. And I just used the end points just to get it to close at the positioning. As you can see there, I've not got the air brake base in, which covers the receiver. But that's simple enough, as I say. Just 3D printed again. So pretty close to the end of it. Now onto the vertical stabiliser and the turtle deck. There's a vertical stabiliser. Now this is a 6x1mm carbon fibre spar. I'm just taping it to hold it in place. And then we're going to tape off both sides just to keep it nice and clean, because obviously it's vertical stabiliser. Different story with the wing plate itself. I don't mind if it's a wee bit messy underneath because you're not going to see it. But here again, mix up some 20 minute epoxy. Just feeding it into the groove. Scrape up as much as I can. And then just give it a wee tease into position. Scrape away any excess. And then let the epoxy cure. Once that was done, flipped it over, and because it's 6mm carbon spar and we're using 9mm foam, just taped it off to get some filler in, just to get it nice and flat and flush. Got the rudder in place as well. So next part's the leading edge, the wing leading edge, lower, middle and the top part. Doing both of them at the same time. Now I've not trimmed any of away, and what I'll do is I'll glue it all together so it's one piece, and then get a sharp blade and trim it back to the shape that we need, and then sand it all into one piece rather than trying to do individuals, which worked out very well. So a small amount of glue on the contact surface, smudge it a bit so it's nice and even and thin. Apply a wee bit of pressure and then that was it, they were good to go. Obviously let it dry a bit, and then take it out, cut it, shape it and sand it. So next is the elevons and the upper leading wing plates. So again, we've got both of them. Do two of them at the same time. These are not trimmed either or shaped. What I'll do is I'll just get them together once I've got them set and glued. Then I'll do the trimming, but just before I put it onto the airframe itself. Simple enough. So next is the turtle deck. Now what I did here, rather than putting it on step by step as the guide says, I built it all as one piece, and the reason I did that is so that I could sand it and get a nice shape to it before I put it onto the fuselage, because me and my sanding, when I put it onto the fuselage, I'd end up scraping into the sides, sanding the sides, probably even chipping a bit. So as you can see, we've got the main centrepiece of the turtle deck. Now we're doing the turtle deck sides, and I've just measured it up, marked off with a pen just to show how far back the glue is going to go. There was a wee bobble on the turtle deck sides. It wasn't quite as flat as I wanted it to be. So again, small amount of glue on both ends, and then just offer it up. And then what we'll do, once the glue is set on this, just get a sharp knife and just trim it to the shape, and then give it a good sand before it's ready to go on. Here I'm just using the air brake base just to show a wee curve in it. Here I'm just sanding it, obviously, because we want that nice curve along it, the vertical stabilizer as well. It'd be difficult for me to put it on and, you know, sand it without causing damage to anything else, especially the fuselage. As you can see here, I've sanded down the fuselage as well, got a nice bit of shape to it, and then we're just putting on the trailing edge parts, and I've marked on it already where the linkages is for the elevators, and a small amount of glue and get the trailing edge on. Once that's set, time to put on the wing leading edge. So now that we've shaped it and sanded it and cut it away, or trimmed away as much as possible, small amount of glue along it, smudge both of them about, and then offer it up into the fuselage and just tease it into position. Get it up as close as you can against the main fuselage, making sure it's flush with the wing leading edge. You may need to trim a couple of the ribs. I did, probably due to my cutting skills, and then do the same with the opposite side. So now it's time to get the 6mm upper wing surface on. You who pour along contact surfaces, offer it up just so I can make sure. We pressed it down just to make sure I could see that there was glue on both sides, and then just along the main rib close to the fuselage, using a wee bit of hot glue just to tack that down and hold it into shape, while the rest of the wing surface is glued and going off and setting. Yeah, a wee bit of hot glue on the inside, and that kept it nice and tight. And then do the same with the opposite side as well. Last but not least, the turtle deck side pieces and the vertical stabilizer. So we're going to glue up the vertical stabilizer. I've cut a wee bit of relief for the servo wire as well. Again, we've got this secured, the servo centered. I've just got a wee servo keeper there just to make sure nothing breaks free. Some glue in the contact surface. On the wee tabs, and then slide it into position. Once the glue sets on that, the turtle deck side should hold it nice and tight as well. So I've put a wee bit extra glue along the the sides of the vertical stabilizer just at the base. Some glue on the base of the turtle deck sides, it's already been shaped. And then I'm just mixing up a wee bit of epoxy just to make sure it's stuck good and proper. And this is just at the base of the vertical stabilizer, because I want it to be nice and tight and as less flex as possible. And that way we can keep the vertical stabilizer nice and straight. So just teased it in, offered it up, and it looked fantastic. Not far away from the finish line now. Just let the 5-minute epoxy set, just holding it on at the back, trying to make sure it looks like it's straight as possible, as vertical as it can be. And once the 5-minute epoxy goes off, I'll be happy at that, ready to move on. Once we're done with that, just have a wee squeeze, just to make sure, because it's contact glue, just make sure the turtle deck's stuck down nice and proper. Really happy at that. We test fit, see how it looks. And again, just a wee spot of UHU pour inside it, not a lot. Again, this was done, I think it was 2 walls, 0% infill as well. It's looking stunning. And then the rear sensor and fitting the wing pods. So the rear sensor, as you can see there, I just used, again, I think it was about a 5-minute epoxy. Just used a wee bit of that to stick it on at the back, but that's it. Get the antenna on, get the IR sensor on, reshape and sand, and that's the model. Absolutely done and completed. So here's hoping that gives you a wee bit of insight into the Typhoon, the Maxx build. Pretty close to the Typhoon itself. Nice and simple enough. There it is before we hit it with the paint job. And of course, this year's livery, Moggy, a good old display Typhoon. Well, looking forward to seeing your builds. I know there's a few yous out there looking to do the Maxx series. Hope this has helped, but do refer back to the build guide as well. Thanks for staying this far. Cheers, pilots.